It was a calm morning that didn't look any different from the rest. The sun was bright but not too harsh, and the air smelled faintly of rain from the night before. On the small two-lane road outside the city, cars moved steadily, some rushing toward work, others cruising lazily toward home. Among them was a small silver car driven by a woman named Maya. She wasn't in any hurry. Her workday at the kindergarten had ended early, and she was just enjoying the quiet drive home, humming to a song on the radio. Maya liked this time of day, that space between work and home where she could just breathe. Her students were a handful, 5-year-olds full of energy and endless curiosity, but she loved them deeply. Teaching wasn't something she chose for money. It was something that made her feel alive. Seeing little ones learn to read or draw always made her day. Still, she was often tired. Life hadn't been easy. She lived alone in a modest apartment, balancing bills carefully, trying to make things work on a small teacher's salary. That afternoon, she was thinking about what to cook for dinner when she noticed smoke rising in the distance. At first, she thought it was someone burning trash or maybe a small fire in the nearby field. But as she drove closer, she saw cars slowing down and people standing by the roadside pointing ahead. Something felt wrong. When she turned the corner, her heart froze. A large black SUV had crashed into the side of a delivery truck. The front of the SUV was crushed and thick gray smoke poured out from the hood. The flames were small at first, flickering around the engine, but they were growing fast. Maya's hands tightened around the steering wheel. She parked her car quickly and jumped out, joining a small crowd of bystanders. The air smelled of burning rubber and gasoline. People were shouting, but most of them stood frozen, unsure what to do. The driver of the truck had climbed out limping but alive and was waving his arms frantically. "There's a kid in there," someone yelled. Maya's head snapped toward the SUV. Through the cracked windshield, she could see a man in the front seat slumped forward but moving slightly. Then she heard it, the faint, high-pitched cry of a child from the back seat. The sound went straight through her chest, her mind blanked. She didn't think, she didn't plan. She just ran. The heat from the flames hit her face as she got closer. The man in the driver's seat was trying to open his door, but it was jammed. His voice was hoarse, desperate. "My son, someone, please. My son's in the back." Maya reached the side of the car. The smoke was so thick she could barely see. The back window was cracked but not broken. She pulled off her jacket and wrapped it around her hand before slamming it against the glass, once, twice, 3 times, until it finally shattered. She reached inside, coughing as smoke stung her throat and eyes. Inside the car seat, a little boy no older than 3 was crying, his face red and wet with tears. He was strapped tightly in his seat, and the buckle was hot to the touch. Maya tugged at it, her fingers shaking. For a second, it wouldn't move, and panic rose in her chest. Then it finally clicked open. She pulled the child into her arms, covering his face against her shoulder. "Got him," she shouted, though her voice came out rough. Someone nearby stepped forward to help her, but the flames suddenly flared, forcing them back. Maya turned and ran, clutching the child close. The heat licked at her arms, and she stumbled once but didn't stop. When she was several feet away, she fell to her knees, gasping for air. The boy was coughing but alive. His small hands clung to her shirt. Behind them there was a loud pop, one of the tires bursting from the heat, followed by another. The man from the driver's seat was being pulled out by 2 other bystanders just as the fire spread to the back of the SUV. Within seconds, the whole vehicle was engulfed in flames. The sight was terrifying, but all Maya could do was hold the boy tighter, whispering softly, "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now." The little boy didn't answer. His chest heaved with small sobs, but he was breathing. Maya gently checked him. A few scratches, maybe some bruises, but nothing serious. She brushed the hair from his forehead, trying to calm him. Her own hands were trembling, and she realized she had small cuts from the glass, her palms dotted with tiny burns. An older woman from the crowd rushed over with a blanket and draped it around both of them. "You're brave, dear," she said breathlessly. "You saved that child's life." But Maya wasn't thinking about bravery. She was thinking about how close it had been, seconds away from disaster. Her heart still raced, her lungs still burned. When she looked up, she saw the man who had been driving the SUV being helped to the ground. His face was pale, covered in soot, but his eyes were searching wildly until they landed on her and the boy. He staggered toward them despite the people trying to keep him still. "My son," he croaked, his voice breaking. He knelt beside Maya, tears cutting through the dirt on his face. He touched his child's cheek, and when the boy reached out to him weakly, the man broke down crying openly. Maya sat there, unsure what to say. She handed the child gently to him. The man held his son like he was afraid to let go. He looked at Maya, his lips trembling, but all he could manage was a whisper. "Thank you. I owe you everything." Before she could reply, sirens filled the air. Fire trucks and ambulances arrived within minutes, flashing lights reflecting off the smoke. Firefighters quickly began spraying foam over the burning car, while paramedics rushed to check on the injured. One of them led Maya to the ambulance, insisting she sit down. She tried to protest, saying she was fine, but the paramedic pointed to the burns on her hands and the redness on her face. "You inhaled a lot of smoke," he said gently. "You need oxygen." Inside the ambulance, as they treated her, Maya finally had a moment to breathe. She looked out the back window at the scene. The wrecked SUV still smoldering, the man sitting on the curb holding his son tightly, surrounded by paramedics. It felt unreal, like something out of a movie. Just an hour ago she was driving home thinking about dinner. Now everything had changed. The boy had survived. That was what mattered. One of the firefighters came over to her later and said, "Ma'am, if you hadn't acted when you did, that kid wouldn't have made it." The fire spread fast and faster than usual. You saved his life. Maya didn't feel like a hero. In truth, she was shaken to her core. The smell of smoke clung to her hair and clothes, and every time she blinked, she could still see the orange glow of the flames. But she nodded quietly and thanked him. As they prepared to take her to the hospital for a quick check, the man approached her again, holding his son close. The boy had fallen asleep against his shoulder, his tiny hand gripping his father's shirt. The man's eyes were red but full of gratitude. He said softly, "I don't even know your name." "Maya," she said, her voice weak but steady. "Maya," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. "You saved my child. I'll never forget what you did today. Never." She gave a small, tired smile. "I'm just glad he's safe," he nodded slowly. "You didn't just save him. You saved me too." Then he looked down at his son again, his expression heavy with emotion. Maya didn't know who he was or how wealthy or powerful he might be. That didn't matter to her. In that moment, he was just a father who almost lost his child. The paramedics guided her into the ambulance, and the doors closed softly behind her. As the vehicle started moving, she leaned back against the seat, exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, and she could feel every ache and burn. She looked out through the small rear window, watching the scene fade into the distance. The sky was turning golden as the sun began to lower. The road that had once felt peaceful now looked different, heavier, marked by what had happened. Maya didn't know that the man she had just met would play a much larger role in her life than she could imagine. All she knew was that she had done what anyone should do when someone needed help. Still, as the ambulance drove toward the hospital, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed forever. Not just for her, but for that man and his son too. Somewhere deep inside, she sensed that this day would not be forgotten. The next few hours passed in a blur for Maya. At the hospital, nurses checked her burns, cleaned her hands, and gave her something warm to drink. She felt tired but grateful. The doctor told her she was lucky. No serious injuries, just smoke inhalation and a few surface burns. They asked her to rest for the night, but she insisted she wanted to go home. While she was waiting for her discharge papers, a soft knock came at the door. When she looked up, she saw the man from the accident standing there, holding a small bouquet of flowers. His clothes were different now, clean, though his face still carried traces of exhaustion and emotion. Behind him, a nurse wheeled in a little boy in a small hospital gown. The boy's face lit up when he saw her. He smiled shyly and lifted his small hand to wave. Maya's heart melted. She smiled back and said softly, "Hey there, little one." The man stepped closer. "I hope we're not disturbing you," he said quietly. "He's been asking to see you since he woke up." "It's no trouble at all," Maya replied, eyed sitting up a little straighter. The boy held a small stuffed bear, which looked new. He whispered something to his father, who bent down and nodded. The boy looked back at Maya. "Thank you for saving me," he said in a small, trembling voice. Maya felt her throat tighten. She reached out and touched his hand gently. You're very brave, she said. You helped me too, you know. You held on so tight. The man looked at her, his eyes full of gratitude. You were the one who didn't let go, he said softly. You went into that fire for him. I don't even have words for what that means to me. Maya shook her head. Anyone would have done the same. He gave a small, tired smile. No, they wouldn't have. I saw people standing there, scared, frozen. You were the only one who moved. She didn't know what to say. There was a long silence between them, filled with something heavy yet warm, the kind of silence that carried meaning. After a moment, he said, I'm Ethan. She nodded. It's nice to meet you, Ethan. He hesitated, looking at her hands wrapped in bandages. Does it hurt? Not much, she said. Just stings a little. I'll be fine. He looked down at the flowers, then placed them on the side table beside her bed. These aren't enough, he said. Nothing would be enough. But I wanted you to have them anyway. That's very kind, Maya said, touched. He nodded slowly. I made myself a promise today. When I saw you pull my son from that car, I told myself if we both made it out alive, I'd never forget you. I don't break promises. His words hung in the air. Maya smiled politely, unsure what to say. She wasn't someone who expected rewards or grand gestures. She had done what she thought was right, that was all. Before leaving, Ethan said quietly, I want to keep in touch if that's all right. I owe you more than I can ever repay, she nodded. You don't owe me anything. But, sure, you can keep in touch. He thanked her again, then guided his son out of the room. The little boy turned once more to wave before they disappeared down the hallway. Maya leaned back against the pillow, exhausted yet strangely emotional. She had no idea that this simple act of courage would start something much bigger than she ever imagined. Over the next few days, life tried to return to normal, but it didn't feel the same. Maya went back to teaching, but the story of the rescue had spread faster than she realized. A passerby had filmed the whole thing, from the moment she broke the window to the second she ran out with the boy in her arms. The video had gone viral. Every news channel played it, and reporters started showing up outside her school. Her students' parents stopped her in the hallways to thank her for setting an example. Strangers sent letters to the school calling her a hero. Some even sent gifts on flowers, cards, small boxes of chocolates. It was overwhelming. Maya wasn't used to attention. She'd always lived quietly, unnoticed, and now the whole town seemed to know her name. Her principal called her into the office one afternoon and said with a proud smile, You've put our school on the map, Maya. We couldn't be prouder. But maybe take the rest of the week off, and you deserve it. She agreed. She needed time to breathe, to process everything. That evening, as she sat at home sipping tea, her phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Hi, it's Ethan. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I just wanted to know how you're feeling. She smiled a little and replied, I'm doing okay. Just trying to get back to normal. He replied almost instantly. Normal might take some time. I still see that fire when I close my eyes. But every time I do, I also see you running toward it. I can't thank you enough. They talked for a while, just simple messages but genuine ones. He told her his son was recovering well, still a bit shaken but smiling again. She felt relieved to hear it. Before ending the chat, Ethan wrote, If it's all right with you, I'd like to meet for coffee sometime. Just to thank you properly. She hesitated for a moment. Then she typed, Sure. Coffee sounds nice. A few days later, they met at a quiet cafe downtown. Maya arrived first and found a small table near the window. She felt slightly nervous. Not because it was awkward, but because she wasn't sure what to expect. When Ethan walked in, he looked different from how he'd appeared that day at the hospital. He was neatly dressed, calm, though his eyes still carried a certain weight. He smiled when he saw her. I wasn't sure you'd actually come, he said, sitting down. I wasn't sure either, she admitted with a small laugh. They ordered coffee, and for a few minutes there was a comfortable silence. Then Ethan leaned forward slightly. You probably don't know who I am, he said. And that's honestly refreshing. Maya tilted her head. Should I know? He smiled faintly. Probably not. I own a few companies in the city. Construction, energy, real estate. That kind of thing. People usually treat me differently when they find out. Maya looked at him unfazed. You're still just a dad whose little boy was in danger, she said. He looked down, smiling softly. Exactly. That's all I was that day, a father who was helpless. You did what I couldn't. Maya didn't know what to say. She sipped her coffee quietly, her heart warming at his words. After a pause, Ethan said, "You told me at the hospital that I didn't owe you anything, but I made a promise to myself and to my son. I want to keep it. You don't need to," she began, but he stopped her gently. "I know I don't need to. I want to. You saved the most precious thing in my life. I can't just walk away and pretend that's something ordinary." His tone was sincere, not dramatic, just honest. Maya sighed softly. "I don't need anything, Ethan, really. Knowing he's okay is enough." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Maybe you don't need anything, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve something good to come out of this. Sometimes life should give back to the people who give everything." She didn't argue. Instead, she smiled faintly and said, "Let's just call it even then." "You bought the coffee," he laughed, a genuine warm laugh that made her laugh too. They talked for a long time. About life, about his son, about her students. Ethan listened closely when she spoke about her work. She told him how her school was small and often lacked basic supplies, how sometimes she had to buy crayons and notebooks with her own money because she couldn't stand seeing her students go without. He frowned slightly. "That shouldn't be happening," he said. "Teachers shouldn't have to struggle like that." Maya shrugged. "It's just the way things are. You get used to it." Ethan didn't respond right away, but there was a thoughtful look in his eyes, the kind of look that meant he was already planning something. When they finally left the cafe, the evening sun was glowing orange. He walked her to her car and said softly, "You might not want anything, Maya, but I'm still going to keep that promise." She smiled gently. "You're persistent," he grinned. "When it matters, yes." She nodded once before getting into her car. "Take care of your boy, Ethan." "I will," he said, "and take care of yourself too." As she drove away, she couldn't help but feel a quiet warmth inside her chest. She didn't fully understand it yet. Maybe gratitude, maybe something more. That night she dreamed of the fire again. But this time, instead of fear, she felt calm. The image of the little boy's smile replaced the sound of the crackling flames. She woke up with tears in her eyes, not from sadness but from relief. The next morning she received an email from her school. It said a large anonymous donation had been made, enough to rebuild their old classrooms and open a new wing for early learning programs. Her principal was overjoyed, saying it would change everything for the children. Maya stared at the email for a long time. She didn't need to ask who it was from. Deep down, she already knew. She smiled quietly to herself and whispered, "He really kept his promise." Then she went to work, holding her coffee in one hand and her lesson plans in the other, the morning sun shining bright above her. Somewhere far away in a tall glass building in the city, Ethan stood by his office window looking out at the skyline. His assistant asked if he wanted his schedule updated for the day. He nodded absently but didn't look away from the view. He wasn't thinking about work. He was thinking about the woman who had run into fire to save his child, and how that single moment had changed his life forever. And from that day on, he made sure his promise wasn't just words. Weeks passed, but the memory of that day still lingered in both their lives. For Maya, it showed up in flashes, the heat of the flames, the crying child, the rush of adrenaline that felt both terrifying and unreal. For Ethan, it was a constant reminder of how fragile life could be, and how a stranger's courage had given him a second chance with his son. Maya tried to go back to her normal routine. Teaching kept her busy, and being around the kids helped her feel grounded again. They didn't care about the news stories or the praise. They just wanted her to read to them, sing songs, and help them draw colorful pictures. That simple joy helped her feel steady. But even with all the noise of everyday life, things weren't quite the same anymore. People still recognized her on the street sometimes. Parents from the school often stopped her just to thank her or tell her how proud they were to know her. It was kind, but it made her uncomfortable. She never wanted to be known as the hero teacher. Then one quiet afternoon, something unexpected happened. The principal called her into the office again. "You should see this," she said, sliding a letter across the desk. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and had the school's name printed neatly at the top. Inside was a short letter from the district's education board. They announced a generous donation from an anonymous supporter to improve local early education programs. Her school had been chosen as one of the beneficiaries. The donation was enough to build an entire new wing. classrooms, a small library, and a playground. Maya was stunned. "Is this real?" she asked, reading the letter twice. "Very real," the principal said with a smile. "And here's the best part, the new building will be named the Hope Learning Center." "You know what that means?" Maya blinked. "Hope," she whispered. "That's what I kept saying to myself that day." The principal looked at her kindly. "I think someone remembered that." She didn't have to guess twice who that someone was. That evening she sat on her couch with the letter in her lap, staring at it for a long time. She picked up her phone, scrolled through her messages, and stopped at Ethan's name. They hadn't spoken much since their coffee meeting, just a few short texts here and there, polite check-ins. She typed, "I think I just found out what you did." Then she erased it. It felt too direct. After a moment, she tried again. "Our school received a big donation today. It's going to help so many kids. Thank you." The message was simple, but it carried more emotion than words could show. He replied a few minutes later, "You don't have to thank me, Maya. You already did more than anyone ever could." She smiled faintly at the screen and typed, "Still, I'm grateful." "You kept your promise." A moment later, another message appeared. "A promise is a promise." She read that line a few times, her heart softening. The weeks that followed were busy with excitement. Construction crews arrived at the school, and the sound of drilling and hammers filled the air every morning. The children loved watching the workers, asking endless questions about what was being built. Maya often joined them at the fence, explaining that soon they would have new classrooms and even a library of their own. Ethan visited quietly one day. He didn't announce himself, didn't bring cameras or journalists. He just showed up with his little boy, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses to stay unnoticed. When Maya saw them standing near the playground, she walked over, smiling. "You didn't have to come in disguise," she teased lightly. He chuckled. "Old habits. People usually recognize me when I show up unannounced. I didn't want to turn this into a media event." She looked down at the boy who was holding his father's hand. "How are you doing, champ?" The little one grinned. "I'm good. Daddy said we came to see your school." "That's right," Maya said. "Do you want to see where I work?" The boy nodded eagerly, so she led them through the school grounds. The children who were outside playing waved cheerfully, and Maya introduced Ethan as a friend visiting. He watched quietly as she interacted with the kids, the patience in her voice, the warmth in her smile, the way she knelt to their level to talk. It was clear she loved what she did. At one point, as they stood near the half-built wing, he said softly, "You really care about this place." "I do," she said. "It's more than just a job. These kids, they're my world." He nodded slowly. "Then I'm glad I could help build something for them." "For you?" She turned to look at him, her eyes gentle. "You didn't just build a school wing, Ethan. You gave them something to dream about. You gave them hope." He looked away for a moment, smiling faintly. "You gave me that first." As the months went by, the new building started taking shape. Maya spent her free time helping the staff choose colors for the classrooms, books for the shelves, and decorations the children would love. The energy around the school was different now, brighter, more alive. Sometimes Ethan would stop by with his son to check on the progress. He never stayed long, but every time he brought small gifts for the students, boxes of crayons, storybooks, and even art supplies. He always asked Maya before donating anything, never wanting to make it feel like a grand gesture. One afternoon, after everyone had left, Maya stood alone inside the nearly finished library. The walls smelled of fresh paint, and sunlight streamed through the tall windows. She walked slowly between the shelves, imagining them filled with books. For the first time in a long while, she felt proud, not just of what she had done that day on the road, but of what had come after. She was lost in thought when she heard footsteps behind her. Ethan had come in quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you could use this," he said, handing her one. "Thank you," she said, smiling. "You always seem to show up at the right moment." He leaned against a wall, watching her for a moment. "I like seeing the progress. It feels good to see something grow out of something that almost ended in tragedy." She nodded. "Life has a strange way of turning things around, doesn't it?" "It does," he agreed softly. "That day, it could have gone so differently. I still think about it every night. I still hear the explosion sometimes in my dreams." Maya looked at him sympathetically. "It takes time. You'll heal, both of you." He hesitated, then said quietly, "You're the reason we're both still here." I don't think I'll ever find the right way to thank you. She met his eyes. You already did. You kept your promise and you changed lives. He shook his head gently. You make it sound like I did all the work. Maya laughed softly. Maybe we both did our parts. They stood there for a while, sipping coffee, watching the sunlight move across the floor. It was peaceful, the kind of silence that didn't need words. The opening day of the new wing came in spring. The whole school gathered outside with banners, balloons, and music. Parents came with their children, local officials gave short speeches, and the students wore handmade badges that said, Hope. When it was time to cut the ribbon, the principal surprised everyone. She invited Maya to the front holding a small microphone. This, she said proudly, all began because of one brave teacher. Her courage reminded us what humanity looks like, and her kindness inspired others to act. The Hope Learning Center exists because of her heart. The crowd cheered, and Maya felt her cheeks flush. She wasn't someone who liked standing in the spotlight, but seeing the happy faces around her made her smile. She took the scissors and cut the ribbon while the children clapped and cheered. Ethan stood a little behind the crowd, watching quietly. He didn't want attention. He just wanted to see the joy that had grown from that day. His son stood beside him, clapping along with everyone else. Later, when most of the guests had left, Maya found him near the playground. The boy was chasing a group of kids around, laughing. She walked up beside Ethan and said softly, You didn't tell anyone it was you. He smiled. It was never about me. Maya looked at the children running under the sunlight. You know, she said thoughtfully, sometimes I still wonder why I ran toward that car that day. I didn't think. I just moved. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was something bigger. Ethan looked at her with quiet admiration. Maybe it was meant to be. She turned to him. Do you believe in that, fate? I didn't used to, he admitted. I thought life was about control, making things happen through power, money, effort. But that day, everything changed in 1 second. And now I look at you, at what you've built here, and I realize some things are just meant to cross paths. Maya smiled softly. Maybe you're right. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of children laughing filled the air, mixing with the rustle of leaves. The boy ran back toward them, his face glowing with happiness. He hugged his father's leg, then turned to Maya and said, Miss Maya, look. I made a new friend. She laughed and knelt to his level. That's wonderful. You're getting brave again. He nodded proudly. Daddy says brave people change the world. Maya looked up at Ethan and their eyes met. Your dad's a smart man, she said gently. Ethan smiled quietly. He learned from one. As the sun began to set, most of the people drifted away. Maya stood at the edge of the playground, watching the orange glow spread across the new building. Ethan came to stand beside her. It's beautiful, he said softly. It is, she agreed. Thank you for keeping your promise. He looked at her, his voice calm but full of emotion. You gave me something to believe in again, Maya. I kept the promise because you reminded me what promises are supposed to mean. She smiled gently, her eyes warm. Then maybe we both kept something alive that day. Not just your son, but something inside both of us. They stood there quietly side by side. As the last bit of sunlight faded from the sky, the world around them was calm again. But deep inside, both knew that their lives had changed forever. After the hospital days passed, Maya slowly returned to her ordinary rhythm. Her burns had healed, the cough was fading, and life seemed to be moving on. But something deep inside her had changed. The world now looked different. Every time she drove past that stretch of road, her chest tightened with memory. The smell of smoke, the sight of that little boy's terrified eyes, and the sound of that man's desperate voice still echoed faintly in her mind. She tried not to think too much about what happened, but it wasn't easy. The rescue had made her a local hero. People at her school whispered about her bravery. Students brought her small drawings of flames and hearts, and parents often stopped to thank her. But Maya didn't feel like a hero. She had acted on instinct, not courage. To her, courage was what people did every single day without applause. Parents working long hours, teachers caring for children others had forgotten. Still, something about Ethan's words lingered in her heart. He had stood by her hospital bed, shaken but grateful, saying he would never forget what she had done. He had promised to make sure her life changed for the better. Maya had smiled then. thinking it was just an emotional reaction, the kind of thing people say when they're overwhelmed. She didn't expect to hear from him again, but a few weeks later, something unexpected happened. One quiet morning, as Maya was preparing her class's art supplies, the school principal, Mrs. Carter, called her into the office. There was a formal letter waiting, typed neatly, sealed with a dark blue emblem. "This came for you, Maya," Mrs. Carter said, adjusting her glasses. "It's from the Caldwell Foundation." Maya hesitated before opening it. Inside was a message written in simple words signed by Ethan himself. "Dear Ms. Thompson, I hope you are healing well. You may not realize the depth of what you've done, but I owe you a debt I can never repay. I've learned about your work, your students, and your school. You dedicate your life to helping children learn and feel seen. I would like to help you continue that mission. Expect something soon. You deserve it." With gratitude, Ethan Caldwell. Maya blinked at the letter, unsure what it meant. She tucked it away in her bag, half expecting nothing to follow. But within a week, the news spread across the school. A massive donation had arrived anonymously, funding the construction of a new learning wing for children with special needs. Everyone was talking about it. The teachers were amazed, the students excited, the community stunned. It wasn't until the donor's identity was revealed that Maya realized the full truth. Ethan had kept his promise. The new building would be called the Hope Learning Center. The day the announcement was made, the staff gathered in the small assembly hall. Maya sat quietly in the back, her hands clasped in her lap, watching as the principal spoke. "This donation," Mrs. Carter said, her voice trembling slightly, "is in honor of an act of courage that showed what humanity really means. The donor has requested that the wing carry a message. Hope is born when one heart saves another." Everyone clapped, but Maya didn't. She was too moved to even lift her hands. Tears filled her eyes as she realized the meaning behind those words. Ethan hadn't forgotten. He had taken his gratitude and turned it into something that would live beyond them both. Later that week, Ethan visited the school quietly. He didn't bring media or security, just himself and his son. Maya was helping some children with reading when she looked up and saw him standing at the door. For a moment, it felt like time paused. He smiled gently and stepped inside, holding his little boy's hand. Liam ran to her without hesitation, laughing. "Miss Maya." She knelt down and hugged him, the warmth of his small arms wrapping around her neck. He was healthy, cheerful, and full of life. It was hard to believe that just a few months earlier his life had hung in the balance. "I hope you don't mind the visit," Ethan said quietly. "Liam's been asking to see you." Maya smiled. "Of course not. I'm just surprised you found the time." He looked around the classroom, the small desks, the colorful art pinned on the walls, the soft hum of children learning. "This place feels like home," he said softly. "I can see why you care so much." Maya shrugged lightly. "It's not perfect. We do what we can with what we have." Ethan smiled, the kind that carried gratitude without words. "You'll have more now," he said, glancing toward the new wing that was being built across the yard. "It's just the beginning." She looked down, almost embarrassed. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," he replied simply. "Because you didn't have to do what you did either." There was a pause, not uncomfortable but heavy with understanding. Outside, the sound of hammers and laughter from the construction site filled the silence between them. Maya finally said, "You know, I never thought that day would lead to this. I didn't even think I'd make it out alive." Ethan's gaze softened. "Neither did I, but you gave me back my son. You didn't just save him, you saved me too." She didn't know what to say. Words felt small against the weight of what they'd both been through. Over the next few months, Ethan stayed in touch. Not in a grand or intrusive way, but through small gestures. A note of thanks, a donation for new books, a message asking how her students were doing. It became a quiet friendship built on shared respect. When the new learning center was finally complete, the school held an opening ceremony. Parents, teachers, and children filled the courtyard, cheering as the ribbon was cut. Maya stood beside Ethan, feeling both proud and humbled. As the crowd applauded, she noticed Ethan watching the children explore the new classrooms, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to measure success in numbers and deals. But this feels like something real." Maya nodded. "You gave them a chance to dream bigger. That's worth more than anything." He looked at her and smiled. "Actually, you did that. I just kept a promise." Later that evening, after the guests had gone, Maya walked through the new building alone. The walls smelled of fresh paint, sunlight streamed through the wide windows, and in one corner hung a small plaque. In honor of those who act without fear, for others they may never know. She touched the plaque softly, feeling a lump in her throat. It wasn't about recognition or fame, it was about meaning. About knowing that something good had come from a moment of terror. Days turned into weeks, and their lives slowly found new rhythms again. Maya continued teaching. Ethan returned to his world of meetings in boardrooms, and Liam started preschool. But the bond between them never disappeared completely. Sometimes Ethan would visit with Liam on weekends, bringing boxes of books or art supplies. Other times he would just drop by for a quiet conversation, away from cameras and attention. One afternoon, while sitting on a bench outside the school, Ethan confessed something. After the accident, he said, "I kept thinking about what matters. For years I worked like time was chasing me. I had money but no peace that day. It made me see things differently." Maya listened quietly, her eyes following a group of children running across the field. "Sometimes it takes a fire to remind us what's really worth saving," she said softly. He nodded slowly. "You're right. Their friendship remained simple, respectful, and built on something rare, gratitude that asked for nothing in return." Months later, during a school event, Maya saw Ethan speaking to the children. He was telling them about bravery, about how heroes aren't the ones in stories, but ordinary people who act when it matters most. The children listened in awe, and when he finished, he pointed gently toward Maya. "Sometimes heroes don't even realize they are one," he said with a smile. Maya blushed as the children clapped, but she didn't feel like a hero, just someone who did what her heart told her to do. As the evening ended, Ethan approached her one last time before leaving. "You know," he said, "I meant it when I said your life would change, but I think you changed mine even more." Maya smiled softly. "Maybe we both changed a little. Maybe that's what life does. It connects people in ways we don't expect." Ethan looked down at his son, who was holding her hand, and nodded. "I'll always be grateful for you," he said simply. When they left, Maya stood watching their car disappear down the road, the setting sun casting a golden glow on everything. For the first time in a long while, she felt completely at peace. In the months that followed, she often found herself reflecting on how one moment could ripple through so many lives. The rescue had changed not just her fate or Ethan's, but the lives of hundreds of children who would now learn in that bright new building. She didn't need recognition or fame. What mattered was that kindness had multiplied. One selfless act had grown into something lasting, something beautiful. And though she would never call herself a hero, everyone who met her knew better. She had saved a child that day, but in doing so, she had also taught an entire community what it truly meant to care. Years had quietly rolled by since that fiery afternoon that had forever changed two lives. The accident had become a story told by others, in schools, at community gatherings, and sometimes on local news anniversaries. But for Maya and Ethan, it wasn't just a story. It was a moment that still lived inside them, shaping everything that came after. The new learning center had been running for 3 years now, full of laughter and light. Children from across the district came to learn, to grow, and to find a place where they felt they belonged. The walls were covered with colorful paintings and notes of gratitude. Every morning, Maya walked through the halls smiling as she saw her students reading or painting quietly. It wasn't always easy, but every day reminded her why she loved what she did. Ethan still visited once in a while. His company had grown even larger, but his priorities had shifted. He spent more time with his son, took weekends off, and began supporting education programs around the country. People admired him for his generosity, but he never talked publicly about the reason behind it. That story was something he kept close to his heart. One spring morning, Maya received an invitation to an event at the community center. It was titled "The Power of Kindness: How One Act Can Change Many Lives." She didn't think much of it at first, assuming it was another charity gathering. But when she saw Ethan's name printed on the card as the guest speaker, her heart softened with curiosity. She decided to go, though she didn't expect to play any part in it. The hall was filled with people, teachers, parents, local leaders, all gathered to listen. Ethan stood on stage, calm but heartfelt, as he spoke about how compassion can change the world. He didn't mention names or details. He spoke about a woman who ran into fire without thinking of herself, and about a moment that showed him how wealth means nothing if it doesn't serve others. As he spoke, Maya noticed a quiet emotion in his voice, a sincerity that could only come from experience. When the speech ended, everyone applauded. Maya didn't expect what came next. Ethan stepped down from the stage and said, "Before I finish, there's someone here who taught me what real courage looks like. I would like her to come forward." The crowd turned as he looked directly at her. For a moment, Maya froze. She hadn't expected to be called up. She never liked attention. But the warmth in his expression gave her courage, and she slowly stood, walking toward him as the audience clapped. He took the microphone again and said quietly, "She won't call herself a hero, but I will, because my son wouldn't be here today if not for her." The audience rose in applause, but Maya only smiled shyly, feeling her eyes sting with emotion. She took the microphone and said softly, "I didn't do anything special. I just did what any person with a heart would have done. I think that's what kindness is, doing what's right even when no one's watching." Her words were simple, but they touched everyone in the room. When she finished, the applause grew even louder, and for a moment it felt as if time itself paused. After the event, people came to her, shaking her hand, thanking her for what she did. Some shared stories of how they too had helped others, inspired by her rescue years ago. Maya listened humbly, feeling something warm bloom inside, a quiet sense of peace. When most people had left, Ethan walked up to her. "You still hate being called a hero?" he teased lightly. She laughed softly. "I don't hate it. I just don't think I deserve it." "You do," he said firmly. "You taught me what really matters. You changed my life without even meaning to." Maya looked at him for a moment, seeing how much he had changed. The driven businessman who once lived only for success now spoke about compassion, about family, about giving back. "Maybe we both learned something that day," she said. He nodded. "We did. Fire takes a lot away, but sometimes it leaves behind something even stronger." They both stood in silence for a moment, watching the sunlight filter through the hall's windows. It felt like a full circle, a quiet ending that didn't need words. As time passed, Maya continued teaching. The children at her school adored her, and the Hope Learning Center became one of the most respected in the region. She never spoke much about the accident anymore, but sometimes, when a child asked her why she had a small scar on her arm, she would simply smile and say, "It reminds me that kindness is powerful." Years later, Ethan invited her to attend Liam's school graduation. She hadn't seen him in a long while, but when she walked into the auditorium, it was as if nothing had changed. Liam, now taller and confident, stood on stage giving a short speech about gratitude. "My father taught me that promises matter," he said proudly. "But the person who taught me what courage means isn't here to hear me say this. She's sitting right there." He pointed to Maya, his voice shaking slightly. "I owe my life to her." Maya felt tears spill down her cheeks. The hall erupted in applause again, but all she could see was the little boy she once pulled from the smoke, now grown into a kind young man. After the ceremony, he ran to her, wrapping her in a warm hug. "You were there when I took my first steps in this new life," he said softly. "I'll never forget that," she smiled through tears. "I'm proud of you, Liam. You've become everything you were meant to be." Ethan joined them, his eyes glistening. "He's graduating," he said with a smile, "and I still think of that day like it was yesterday." "I do too," she replied. "But I'm glad the story didn't end there." He nodded slowly. "No, it didn't. It turned into something beautiful." Over time, their paths drifted but never fully separated. Maya continued her work quietly, mentoring new teachers, organizing charity drives, and helping children who needed extra care. Ethan became known as one of the country's most generous philanthropists, always using his success to build opportunities for others. And though the world praised him for it, he knew exactly who had lit that spark in him. Every year, on the anniversary of the accident, he sent a bouquet of wildflowers to the school. No note, no signature, just a simple card that said, "For the day that gave us hope." Maya always recognized them. She would place them in the corner of her classroom, near the window where sunlight hit just right, and for a moment she would stand there quietly, remembering, as years passed, The memory of the fire faded in public memory, but not for them. For Maya, it was a reminder of how fragile and precious life could be. For Ethan, it was the day he discovered that strength doesn't come from power or wealth, but from kindness and courage. One late afternoon, as Maya was packing up after class, she noticed a small group of students sitting near the window, whispering excitedly. "Miss, tell us that story again," one of them said. "The one about the lady who saved the little boy from the fire." Maya smiled softly. "You really like that story, don't you?" They nodded eagerly. "It's our favorite," said one girl. "It makes us feel brave." Maya paused, looking at their innocent faces, then began telling the story again, not with drama or big words, but simply as if it was a quiet truth. She told them about the day someone made a choice, about how small moments can change everything, and about how kindness always finds a way to grow. When she finished, one boy asked, "Did that lady ever see the boy again?" Maya smiled and said gently, "Yes, she did. And he grew up to be someone who helps others, because kindness doesn't stop with one person. It keeps going." The children smiled, satisfied. As they left the room, Maya sat for a while, gazing out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft colors, and for a brief moment she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The accident had once been chaos and fear, but now, years later, it had become a story of hope that reached beyond them, touching hearts, inspiring others, reminding everyone that even a single act of bravery can light 1,000 more. That night, as she walked home under the calm sky, she thought about how far life had brought her. The road was quiet, the air gentle, and the stars began to appear one by one. She felt grateful, not for fame or recognition, but for having been part of something that mattered. She knew Ethan and his family were out there somewhere, living their own lives, carrying the same memory in their hearts, and that was enough. Sometimes life didn't give you perfect endings, it gave you meaningful ones, and for Maya that was more than enough. Because long after the flames were gone, the warmth of that one moment, that one act of courage, still burned bright in the hearts it had touched.